if you pursue him and you get him to like you back, what are you going to do when you're married? When you're married and you have a lot of little ones, do you want a husband that's going to pursue you and love you and be interested in the things you're interested in? Well, then wait and step back and guard your heart and let him pursue you and pursue your parents and pursue God. Because there are times I knew for almost 2 years that Josh was probably the one God had for me. I felt it in my heart. I believed it. My dad felt the same way. And when my dad talked with me, he said, don't tell mommy, don't tell anyone else, but you pray for him every day. And I did.
Hey guys, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It's Monday, November 1st. Josh Duggar is going to be in court on November 18th for pretrial, and he also then has his trial starting on November 30th. By now we know that Josh will not be taking a plea deal, and we also know that he and his attorneys are getting ready for all things trial. We know that they filed multiple motions in court, which all were denied by the court. And we also know that prosecutors in this case were asking Josh to provide them evidence of an alibi if he planned to use that as a defense. Well, on Friday, October 29th, the judge filed an order which basically said that the alibi defense at this point was moot, which means irrelevant. So in a case of a motion, if it is labeled moot, it means that the motion is not relevant to the case, likely meaning that Josh is not going to be using an alibi defense, meaning he is likely not going to argue that he wasn't there. There could be reasons why he's not going to do this. Maybe he doesn't have an alibi. Maybe no one would lie for him. Making false statements to federal prosecutors and to agents in the FBI is actually a crime, and lying on the witness stand is perjury. So it would be very hard for someone to lie knowing that they could potentially be put into prison if they did. So he is apparently not going to be using the alibi defense, which makes you wonder, what defense is he going to use? Well, we know that Jim Bob has been telling people through the people I've spoken to that there's a shady-Ex-con that they planned to use as their person that did this. The problem is that person, according to prosecutors, was in jail at the time all of this happened. So in the court from September, they revealed that the two witnesses, one was Matthew Waller and one was this guy named Randy. Matthew Waller is David Waller's younger brother, and he does not have a criminal history that I could find. Randy also, through searches on the Pacer website and in Arkansas, I also could not find any criminal history for him. So the shady-Ex-con would have had to be the number 2, and that person, according to the prosecutors, he was actually incarcerated. Now, witness number 2 also seemingly had a relationship with somebody else, meaning he likely was already connected to somebody, and that person, I'm guessing, is Matthew Waller. So in the world of the IBLP, they all know each other, they all interact, it's not a huge organization, and in the elite upper echelon, it most certainly isn't a big organization. They all know each other, they all interact with each other, they all socialize with one another. So witness number 2's identity was never identified by the prosecutors, and at the hearing, Josh withdrew his request. So I did some sleuthing, and I believe I know who it is. I'm not going to tell you his name, but I will tell you what I learned. I believe the person that he wanted to pin this on is actually the grandson of a prominent pastor that's in the IBLP. And this person actually, based on court records, was in jail at the time all of this was happening. So this person apparently had worked for Josh in 2017 and 2018. And he had moved to Arkansas from another part of the country. While living in Arkansas, he worked off and on for Josh, I was told, and then he left and he moved a couple hours away. He got married and he had a kid, and he started his own business, which I was able to cross-reference for everything. Then he ended up getting arrested in 2018, I think around the time or not long after he started opening his other business and left working for Josh. And that arrest was related to stuff that he did to his stepson. So he gets arrested for, I think it was domestic abuse, child abuse. As a part of that case, he ends up taking a plea deal. So the plea deal actually was, I think, signed around April 18th or 19th, and he was sentenced to 45 days behind bars. And then he was put on probation for like 4 years after that. So Josh's person that would have been the shady-Ex-con actually would have been a shady-Ex-con per se. A guy he was charged with a felony, although I'm not sure if the plea deal ended up being a felony or not. But the initial charge was a felony, and he did spend time behind bars, and he also did have a past. Problem is that they can't use him because he was locked up. He's now on all kinds of probation. He had to take a bunch of classes for parenting, anger management, do a bunch of counseling. I have no idea where he stands today. But this person, knowing that he was going to be thrown to the wolves by the Duggars, it's actually just sort of another indication to me that Jim Bob Duggar literally has no loyalty but to Jim Bob and himself and his family and covering up for Josh. So think of it this way. This is someone that Jim Bob and Michelle have been close to for years. And I'm, again, not going to say who it is. I will say it's not the Bates. So it's not the Bates, you guys. But the IBLP is big. There's lots of different people, but they have a lot of friends. Oh my gosh, so many friends. But they've been friends with these people for years. And it's just odd that someone that they've claimed to respect for so long, they were willing to potentially throw their loved one to the wolves and try to pin this on them, even though their loved one was already paying for crimes he had already committed against someone else. I'm not for anyone hurting a child. I'm not for what happened to the kid. What happened was horrible. But you can't accuse someone of a crime they didn't commit and bring up their past as a reason when their crime had nothing to do with CP, and this individual has no charges related to CP. His crime had nothing to do with CSA either. So the guy has a horrible temper and uses really bad discipline on his kid, and I'm putting that mildly. That's very different than what Josh was into. But I think in the world of the Duggars, maybe they were thinking, well, if you break your law here, what else would he break the law doing, right? So now it comes to the question of what are the Duggars going to do, because they can't use this as a defense. How do you use this as a defense if you know that this person's out? You withdrew him from the motions. You find out from prosecutors he was incarcerated. Heck, they probably knew he was incarcerated. I have this very strong feeling they had to have known. Sometimes I feel like, do they really think they're smarter than everyone else? So then that only leaves two other people that they used as witnesses for this case that could potentially be blamed, or a mysterious, elusive person that was never interviewed by the police or the authorities, which again seems very impractical or improbable. So then it comes down to, you can't blame Randy because he wasn't working there yet. And Matthew Waller wasn't working there either. So Matthew Waller, I'm believing, is maybe the person that purchased cars from him, but wasn't necessarily an employee of Josh. And Randy was an employee of Josh, but didn't start until the very end of May. And the other person didn't work there at the time and was in jail. And that other person is a friend of the family. And Jim Bob literally will throw anyone under the bus. I mean, when you think of Josh, think of all the people he's thrown under the bus. His daughters, Anna, his daughters. Now, these three individuals that likely had nothing to do with this and didn't have anything to do with this, according to the prosecutors. He has cut ties with anyone that has told him that what he's doing with Josh is not okay. He will do any of this to cover up and maintain his image. And all of this sort of sits with Jim Bob and his running for Senate, which, by the way, I talked to a couple people and they were not impressed. So let's just say this. They believe that Jim Bob is running for the Senate because they think that Jim Bob is trying to save face with his base followers and make them appear as though he's not sweating things. And they also feel like he might be trying to use this as a way to argue that like our constitutional rights were violated, and I need to fight for your constitutional rights. Nowhere in Jim Bob's statement did he say that he needs to fight for children. Nowhere in his statement did he say that he needs to fight for better laws around what Josh was doing or penalties for individuals that what Josh was doing. Nothing. The Duggars have never spoken about the victims in this case and have always focused on the Josh and getting Josh out of this. Even if he gets convicted, they still don't think that Jim and Michelle will actually believe it. They don't think that Jim Bob is capable of accepting this. I don't know that anyone can say that Jim Bob had any clue about what Josh was doing. He knew well enough that Josh was up to no good for years, but he just always covered it because the show must go on. He had an image to maintain. He's the one bad seed. He's doing his best to keep his eye on it, but he's not really doing anything to help the situation. And it's like they always say a narcissist never really knows when their life is falling apart until it's too late. And that narcissists like this will commit small little crimes along the way. And sometimes they'll end up getting arrested. Sometimes their image will blow up because the image that they've portrayed is not who they are. And so Jim Bob can spend all the time he wants to portray what he is or he believes he is to the world. But the truth eventually will come out. The truth does come out. And Jim Bob's years of this sort of con will eventually be completely exposed. I hope people will literally go on record. I am still working on that. There's a lot of people I've been talking to, and I will say the biggest fear they have right now is retaliation. They are scared of the Duggars. They have a lot of money and a lot of power and a lot of influence, even though their son is going to maybe go to prison for a very long time. So Josh Duggar is not using the alibi defense, and witness number 2 was in jail, did work for him, and was the grandson of a prominent pastor. And Jim Bob was willing to throw his friend and his grandson under the bus. What are your thoughts on that? Tell me in the comments below. Bye, guys.